In the early 1900s, a series of damaging floods prompted Congress to authorize a reservoir for flood control, water conservation, and other purposes near the mouth of the Big Blue River. First mention of such a reservoir appeared in official congressional documents in 1928. Tuttle Creek Reservoir was authorized in 1938 for flood control, recreation, fish and wildlife, navigation, and water quality. Initial construction on Tuttle Creek Dam was to begin in the late 1940s, but was delayed because of vigorous local opposition. The 1951 flood was the last great flood before the Tuttle Creek Dam was built later in the 1950s and early 1960s. It reportedly caused an estimated $8 million in flood damages. After the 51 disaster, the local newspapers were filled with articles requesting the federal government to intercede and build dams along the Big Blue, Republican, and Smoky Hill rivers. Beginning in the early 1950s and continuing for several years, vigorous opposition to Tuttle Creek Dam was directed at officials at local, state, and national levels by the rural population, which would be adversely affected by the lake. 3,000 Blue Valley residents and 10 towns were affected by the construction of Tuttle Creek Lake, and the controversy surrounding the decision to build it was intense. Many folks had strong feelings about Tuttle Creek Dam in the early days of planning and construction. Some residents who worked for the Corps during construction were subject to verbal abuse, ridicule, and even threats. A series of intense rains in the winter, spring, and early summer of 1993 raised Tuttle Creek Lake to a record-high lake level of almost 63 feet above normal. The flood of 1993 resulted in the only spillway releases in the history of the lake. All 18 Tainter gates were raised 4 feet during the flood's peak. 60,000 cubic feet per second of water flooded the entire River Pond Park below the dam and many homes in Manhattan. The flood of 1993 was the first major flood to occur after Tuttle Creek Dam was built. Many locals involved with fighting the flood agreed that 93 would have been much worse than the 51 flood without the protection offered by Tuttle Creek Dam. Flooding can never be completely stopped, but with our system of dams and other flood protection, at least the loss of life and property can be lessened.